All right. Let's get fired up here.
Maximum freedom. Read.
Stay on target.
Maximum freedom.
Stay on target.
Maximum freedom. Read Rothbard.
Well, hello and welcome to the actual Anarchy podcast, the podcast where we talk about movies from a Rothbardian and Anarcho-Capitalist perspective. And tonight we are celebrating Earth Day in the post sense. It was this past Monday, but we were preoccupied with the Easter movie, The Passion of the Christ, which I thought would be one of our most controversial episodes of all time. And it elicited some comments, but not for reasons that I thought. So I want to talk about that with our guest and with Robert during the Last Nighters portion of the show. This is going to be episode 126 of the show, and it can be found at actualanarchy.com/126. We're going to have the Anarchist Mom on tonight to talk about Galaxy Quest. Before we get to that, Robert, how you doing, my friend?
It's Flat Earth Day. That's like a new holiday. It's really catching on. I didn't know that it was, holiday.
Did I just say that, or is it actually Flat Earth Day?
I don't know. You tell me.
I don't know. I said Monday was Earth Day.
Oh, just regular Earth Day?
Regular ass Earth Day, where you're supposed to
Boring.
Plant trees,
Propaganda.
recycle, give more power to the government,
Oh, okay.
institute a
board.
carbon tax,
Okay. That sounds
hate
good.
yourself for living in the lap of luxury.
That all sounds like virtuous progressive values. So I'm on.
It's all about that virtue signaling. And the funny thing is, many communities have just recently given up on recycling because it's an economic loser. It is actually not saving anything. It's expending resources and wasting resources more than it saves resources. So yes, and there are many articles like that out recently, even in some mainstream press. So it's kind of an interesting thing that the timing is such that we've got the Earth Day thing and the Green New Deal. Yeah, that was very prominent recently. So anyway, why don't we get into the Last Night's portion of the show? We'll introduce our guest who's already chimed in, albeit
Rude.
a little rudely.
I'm so rude.
We will rebuke you, Anarchist Mom, during the Last Night's portion of the show. Hey everyone, it's Daniel Elwood and Robert Johnson, the Last Nighters, and the Last Nighters are part of the Launchpad Media, where they're always launching new ideas in your direction. This is going to be episode 69 of the show, and you can find the show notes more at lastnighter.com/69. We're going to be doing Galaxy Quest with our friend, the Anarchist Mom, from anarchistmom.com, and we did not choose the guest appearance related to the number of the episode. I just want to make that clear, that this is in no way a problematic
the Me Too moment right now.
Me Too, hashtag episode 69. So, Anarchist Mom, before we get to that Google descriptione, tell us about your show, your website, and where can people find it?
You can find my podcast all the platforms. Finally. Just a little podcast that I'm supposed to do every week, but I missed. But yeah, I just something on Facebook that pisses me off, and I rant about it for like 3 or 4 minutes.
So these are little hot takes. They're short but spicy, and I've listened to a few, and you always open with like, my mood today is this song, or something, and then you talk about one of the morons who engages with people on your Facebook profile page.
Yeah. Well, the last couple times it's been about dumbass, but yeah, pretty much.
Well, I like it because it's spicy and it's gossipy, and people like to hear that kind of stuff. Right or wrong. I mean, it's vapid, right? That whole gossipy stuff, but it also is appealing to people for some reason, and they're short, so that's helpful. Now, you were our guest before on episode 48, where we talked about the Lord of the Rings trilogy. So that can be found at lastnighters.com/48. So we will link that on this show notes page as well, so people can hear your prior audience experience, your introduction to our audience. Also on thelaunchpadmedia.com, I think I said that already. And Robert, before we get to that Google description, you have any comments related to our guest, prior appearance, or listening to her show at all?
No, we're just going to have to tread lightly. This woman, she is really upset about the patriarchy and misogyny, so we're going to have to be really careful.
All right, so
She will destroy us.
if we were doing Jurassic Park, she'd be a Trigosaurus.
I like it.
All right. Well, that's enough filler content here. And I say that advisedly because both of you indicated that you didn't think there was much to talk about on this one. So we're trying to elongate this. We're trying to elongate this just a little bit. So let's do that with the Google description. I'll do a very slow read. All right.
Okay, perfect. Yes.
All right. Galaxy Quest, 1999. Fantasy sci-fi, 1 hour, 42 minutes. 7.3 on that IMDb, 90% Rotten Tomatoes, 70% Metacritic. However, 92% of Google users like it. The description is thus: the stars of a 1970s sci-fi show, now scraping a living through reruns and sci-fi conventions, are beamed aboard an alien spacecraft. Believing the cast's heroic on-screen dramas are historical documents of real-life adventures, the band of aliens turn to the alien celebrities for help in their quest to overcome the oppressive regime in their solar system. Release date, Christmas 1999, right before the Y2K bug. We can talk about that. That'll be a little bit more filler. Box office, $90.7 million. The director is Dean Parisot, or Parisot. I'm not sure how you say his name. This plays on the IFC channel on Tuesday and Wednesday, 5:30 p.m. and 1 a.m. respectively. Anarchist Mom, your thoughts on the description so far? And also a follow-up question, why'd you pick this one?
I think description great. Reason I picked, when I talked to you guys about being on the show, I went Tombstone, but then Robert was like, we done did that movie. And so then the first movie came to my mind was Galaxy Quest. But then I changed it and I wanted to do Shallow Hal. I didn't want to pay $14.99 plus theft to watch it. That's why.
All right. I am so rebuked, but yeah, $14.99 plus theft is a bit rich for my blood here. Robert, your take on the description and the verbal assault that just occurred.
Well, yes, you are a victim of her verbal attack. That is violence. It's absolutely true. Words hurt. Anarchist Mom cause harm, pain, and Daniel's feels. But anyway, the movie, yeah, that's what happens in the movie. It was funny. There's some good stuff, kinda, a little bit. It plays like an episode of Star Trek, an old episode of Star Trek, but kind of updated for the end of the 20th century. I don't know. It's got bad CGI that didn't age well. It's got a really good creature effects on the main villain, though. He looks really cool. I thought he was really good.
Yeah, what's his name? Sisek? Is that right? Saris. See,
Sarek?
Sarek.
S.
Saris. Saris?
Saris?
Saris.
Okay, I'll take.
What is she saying? I can't.
Who knows? I don't know. When a woman talks, it's just blah blah blah.
Oh my God.
All right, Andrew's mom.
If I wanted to be verbally assaulted, I would have gone to my parents' house.
Well, I'm glad that you can come here and get the same level of love and care. All right, so Robert, you mentioned the Star Trek, and yeah, this is a bit of a send-up of Star Trek, and it is so much one that during a convention, I think in the early 2010s, so maybe 2011 or so, they included this in their ranking of best Star Trek movies up to that point. There were 11 legitimate Star Trek movies in the franchise at that time, and they added this as the 12th for their rankings, and this came out as number 7 of list of best Star Trek movies.
Up to 2000. Yeah, I mean, the 90s were filled with some craptacular Star Trek movies. The Next Generation ones did not start off well. I think they got ended a little bit better, but I think that was post-2000.
I think it was in 2011 when this poll was taken at a convention.
Oh, well then.
So it might have included the first of the Chris.
You got to have the first Star Trek. You got Wrath of Khan, maybe Star Trek 3, and then 4 is crap, 5 is crap, 6 is crap. But then it gets a little bit better at the end. I don't know. All
right, so I know that our listeners can't see this, but some of our viewers can. We're talking to the hand. Your hand is like up while you're talking. So it's like bad CGI effects. Like, oh, the monster of the hand is going to get us. But anyway, yeah, I found that kind of interesting that they actually included this in here. And it is a cool thing that they do this parody satire of Star Trek and the concept of the conventions and super fans like knowing so much more about the show than even the people who made the show, because they're the ones behind the scenes like reconstructing like, okay, this must have been here because in this episode, they turn the corner and you can see this. So therefore, the dilithium crystal, box is over there or whatever. And it reminded me of when we watched The Shining for an episode we did a while back. There were people who were analyzing and doing like layouts of the Overlook Hotel and how the rooms and where the windows were actually impossible. And they had theorized that was intentional by Kubrick so that viewers wouldn't know what was wrong, but they would sense this unease because where things were in relation to each other didn't make sense, kind of not on a cognitive level or a conscious level, but it didn't add up. So then it would kind of weigh on people as a viewer.
Right. So I think you're specifically talking about when Jack first gets interviewed for the job. There's a window behind the guy that doesn't make any sense at all. But as far as the movie is concerned, the writing in Galaxy Quest, it's actually pretty tight. Like you were saying, there's a lot of good foreshadowing done for the nerds that know all the stuff about the ship and they know all the details about everything. And they establish early on that the actors don't really know that much. And then you get a payoff for that at the very end. It was pretty fun, where the actors, who do they turn to when they need to have specific knowledge about the ship? They call the nerds. Yeah, it's fun.
Yeah, the nerdy fan base that they really save the day. But there's also an arc with the characters themselves because they start out, they were just actors. The show was mildly successful. They had a bit of a cult following, and so they were on that sort of convention circuit for a while and doing like electronic store openings. And there was some jealousy going on because the Tim Allen character was like the most famous of them, or he got the most attention, but it was also attention of like people were embarrassed by him. Like they were giving him attention because he thought it was serious, and so they were making fun of him. Do you follow what I'm getting at? Like, I'm not sure how to say it, but
so he's patronizing them?
Well, he had notoriety as being this guy who was very full of himself, but people never took him seriously. But he thought they were serious about their adoration for him. Granted, there were some groupie type women, at least displayed in the convention scenes. But for the most part, like those guys in the bathroom who were making fun of all of the hack actors, the has-beens, they were saying, "Oh yeah, the Tim Allen guy, yeah, he thinks he's so great, but he's such a buffoon. Everyone knows he's a jackass." And that's what causes him to break out of his sort of haze, his comfortable haze of, oh, I was famous and now I just get drunk a lot and go to these conventions on whatever timeline I want. I make the fans wait, whatever, it doesn't matter. But he realized that people were not really into him anymore, or that they had never been in the first place.
So to some people, yeah, I thought that was kind of funny that he was so in this bubble that he didn't have a realistic perspective on what other people outside of the nerd fandom thought of him. So yeah, when he hears this mocking talk in the bathroom, he's kind of taken aback and totally changes his perspective. And all of a sudden he's out of character and he hates this whole thing and he's embarrassed to be this guy. I thought it was a little unrealistic, but you gotta have an arc. So it's all right.
Yeah, and it does pay off at the end because he tells the Justin Long character, it's not even a real thing. It's just a TV show. Those are cardboard cutouts. And at the end,
he's like, it's all real.
Yeah, it's all real, man. He's like, I knew it was real. So it was a nice little payoff. And by the way, this was Justin Long's movie premiere, like his first movie, as was Rainn Wilson's first appearance. And he had all of like one or two lines. But Robert, you actually have met Rainn Wilson. Yeah. I don't know how much so, but was it during the Office kind of thing where he was known for that, or was he doing other things when you knew him?
No, he was a struggling actor in New York City when I knew him. He was doing a show called The New Bozina, which was a 3-man like comedy improv performance type thing off Broadway. And fun fact, we wouldn't know Rainn Wilson as the world famous actor that he is if it weren't for our wonderful favorite thing called rent control.
Oh,
so he was in a very rent controlled apartment, and he wouldn't leave, but his landlord was desperate to get him out and to get a new tenant in, because when you get in a new tenant in, you can set your price, like at a market rate. But anybody who's grandfathered in, you have to like keep it at this low rate. So he actually offered Rainn $30,000 to get out, and Rainn was like, "Okay, I'll take the $30,000 and I'll move to LA." And he moved to LA right around 2000-ish. And his first gig, I think he had like a little bit of commercial work, but then his first main real gig was like, I think Days of Our Lives. He was a recurring character, and he survived, I think, for maybe a few episodes before getting a few bit parts in like this movie, and then before he really landed his big office role, he took off from there. But yeah, he was his dad was married to my mom, so we were stepbrothers.
That's another movie we should do, Step Brothers. I think I know that you're kind of down on this comedy bent that I've got, but there is so much to talk about.
There is not so much to talk about. Everything's done for comedic effect, so anytime anything happens, you can't really take it seriously. And because I want to analyze it from an anarcho-capitalist economic perspective or a real world type of a perspective, would this really happen? Blah, blah, blah. What are the motivations that go into this? And the comedy is just like, well, he did it because it's funny.
Right, and we've already brought up real world situations and rent control. Anarchist Mom, tell us.
Tangentially.
I know you've heard this show before. That's how we do. This is how we do. Anarchist Mom, let's talk about rent control a little bit. What incentives would be at play when you have a situation as described by Robert, where you have a tenant who's underpaying versus market rates, and you've got an owner of the property who would like to actually make a profit, actually make money and not lose money on the building they're renting out? What incentive is in play there when there's rent control?
I don't know.
Well played, Anarchist Mom. That's a good answer.
I'm not ready for.
All right, well,
You didn't go with the hard balls. You got to throw softballs at her before she gets comfortable, Daniel.
All right, fair enough. Well, my thoughts on this is that the incentive is to do whatever they can to get that tenant out. And usually it's not offer them 30 grand. Usually it's don't fix the heat, don't fix the plumbing, things like fall apart, things don't get fixed and they're not nice to them, things like that. And
then you get vilified as a slumlord.
Right, you get vilified as a slumlord, as in the Daredevil series on Netflix, right?
Yes.
And Murdoch is all about getting those terrible slumlords who are victimizing the old ladies who are paying the rent-controlled apartment prices, where it's like $100 for an apartment that would go for $2,000. It's like ridiculous, Like what do you expect to happen there when the incentive structure is such that you can't make money on something you own? You're forced into having these tenants there. It's your property. You can't do anything about it illegally. So you go to less legal means. Makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah, you offer your tenant, hey, you just want to take some cash? Because I may lose in the short term, but I'm going to make it out in the long term. And this is how I actually get around this dumbass law.
Now, there are other ways that are around this dumbass law. I visited New York a couple of times, like 10 years ago, and had some friends there. And they were telling me that because of rent control, they would skirt that by having what's called a key fee. So, yeah, you can have the apartment for $300 a month, but the key is going to cost you 10 grand.
What? A month or upfront?
Upfront. The key will be 10 grand, and then your apartment is $300 a month for the year, for the lease.
Damn.
And so it's a way of getting around the regulation, but you're still paying the market rate for the apartment, because if you had the 10 grand plus the 300 a month for the year, break it across 12, you would end up with the same amount.
It still screws things up, though. I mean, if you want to move, then you got to have a huge chunk of cash.
Right. And Rothbard talks about this in some of his lectures, where it used to be a normal thing for people to move in New York like every year or two. It was just like a normal thing. You'd move to another borough, another neighborhood, whatever. And when these rent control situations happened, all that stopped, or a lot of it stopped. And people were like, well, I've got this rent controlled apartment now, and I'm going to live here for 40 years or as long as I can.
Right.
Like in Friends.
Yes, like in Friends.
Yep.
I don't remember if that was specifically rent controlled, but it must have been.
It was.
It was for sure?
Yeah. That was the storyline.
All right. And there's also...
Was it positively told? Positively depicted as a good thing? Because they had lived in a really nice apartment, as I recall.
Yeah, it was. It's totally positive told.
Yeah, and then there's that famous Seinfeld episode where they're reading the obituaries, trying to find apartments where they can get the rent-controlled apartment.
There are tons of episodes of Seinfeld where they're trying to get apartments and people die. There's at least 3 or 4.
Yes, because it's so hard to get a good apartment in New York City, or at least it was at the time. Because government gets in the way of the market.
By Grabthar's hammer, by the Sons of Warvan, we shall avenge those victims of rent control. Which Walter Block has a great book, Defending the Undefendable, and he talks about the miser and the libeler and the slanderer and all these things, and the slumlord, and how they're actually providing a valuable service to the community. And one of his books is he has pictures of Dresden after World War II bombings and the Bronx after rent control. And the trick is you got to figure out which is which, and you can't really tell. So rent control, totally disincentivizes taking care of the properties. And lo and behold, all of a sudden there's a lot of fires for the insurance money when you have things like that. So perverse incentives at play. But let's get back to Galaxy Quest, shall we?
Yeah, because there's so much to talk about.
Robert, never give up and never surrender. All right.
I'm not going to surrender, but I might give up on this movie. I wrote down 2 notes in case we run out of ideas. Yeah.
All right,
Daniel, you got action. What?
Give me your first note, and then we'll go to Anarchist. Direct it towards Anarchist Mom.
Okay, Anarchist Mom.
Okay, I'm ready. I'm a little drunk.
Aren't we all? So the Sigourney Weaver character,
Yes.
who has your favorite line,
Yes.
she is unhappy with her depiction of her character on the show. She's just a person that repeats the computer, and then she's just like the sexy, like eye candy lady. And even during the convention, she's brought out onto the stage with like the sexy, like striptease type music.
Oh yeah.
And I was curious how you thought, because she kind of struck me as like this kind of like upset feminist lady. However, I mean, if the entirety of your character is just how you look, and then otherwise you're kind of this dumb character, I can see why that would be annoying. However, I mean, this is a completely voluntary job, and she is obviously benefiting from it. Otherwise, she'd be doing something else. What did you think about the character? Obviously, she's your favorite. You identify with her on some level. What do you think about her gripes? Talk about your favorite character. Come on.
I don't know if she's my favorite. It's like that one quote that she did. But I mean, obviously.
All right, hold on. Don't hold us in suspense. What is the quote?
The quote is, she's like, I have one job on this lousy ship. It's stupid, but I'm doing it. So she has to computer. But I don't know. I mean,
well, she is the middleman between the captain and the computer. She serves absolutely zero function. The captain says something, computer, do whatever, and then she goes, computer, do whatever he said. And then when the computer says something, she just repeats it as if she's translating the computer, but she's not.
I actually had this experience today with Google, whatever on your phone. You can talk to your phone. And last night I said, okay, and then something else. And the phone responded and it said, would you like me to tell you a joke? And so I said, okay. And it said, something like, how do you know elephants are always ready to travel? And they always have a trunk with them, but that kind of a thing. And so I thought, oh, that might be fun to show the kids tomorrow. So today, right? And so I went inside the house from my office and I left my phone out here. And so I wanted to do the joke thing with my kids, and my wife's phone was on the counter and the kids were at the table. And I'm like, oh, okay, I will talk to my wife's phone and get it to tell a joke. It didn't recognize my voice because it had been programmed with her voice when she set it up. So my theory is that the NEAS protector computer system is attuned to Boobs McGee's voice and not Tim Allen's voice.
Marco. Yes. See, she can complain all she wants, but paid all that money to show. Like, he complained about like her TV guide appearance, like 3 paragraphs about how her boob, but I mean, obviously that bad to do it. So I don't think she has much to complain about. She made money off her boob.
Now, what about the Snape sheriff?
I wish I could.
What about the Snape character, the sheriff of Nottingham? He was a Shakespearean stage actor, well-trained. He felt that this was beneath him, and he took the job at the time, and he was typecast. This was very much like Leonard Nimoy after his turn as Spock, that he was also sort of typecast as a certain type of actor. And he, in interviews in the 70s and 80s, lamented the fact that he was always thought of as Spock. And so he wasn't able to play other roles other than I saw some clips of him doing like singing about hobbits, wearing bell bottoms, and playing a ukulele, I think.
Sounds like some strong roles, yeah.
I had a dream about Kirk and Spock when we were driving around the neighborhood listening to music in a convertible.
All right, you are drunk.
No, but
That's a strong story, Anarchist Mom. Appreciate that share.
So is this the level of content that you usually offer your listeners?
It's what they come for. You can't get it anywhere else.
All right, well, they should support you on Patreon. And so I think go to patreon.com. That's great. And we're one of your supporters, right?
Yes, you are.
Yeah, and you're one of ours. So it's this reciprocal relationship here.
Or just cancels out.
Yep.
Totally
Exactly what it does.
Well, not only does it cancels out, but we have to pay taxes on it. So really, we should stop doing it because we're disenabling them. But what are your thoughts on the Alan Rickman character? Because he's got a similar situation, not with his boobs, but he's got like he's over talented for the position, and then he gets kind of pigeonholed into it, and he's very saddened by this. Like it bothers him very much. And like when the Tim Allen character shows up later, he's like, "Oh, did I miss Rickman's mental breakdown or panic attack?" Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I just feel like did it. I don't know. Robert, you talk about it.
Sounds like she knows, but she doesn't want to tell us.
What does Omega 13 do?
So Rickman, I mean, getting typecast for your most famous role as an actor happens a lot. I think like all the Harry Potter kids. Yeah, all the Harry Potter kids, the Hobbit actors. Anytime you're in some kind of big monumentous thing that just goes crazy, you're going to get known for that role. I mean, how long was Keanu Reeves Neo? It just happens as an actor. If you have the benefit of being on a show. I was just watching Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones is out right now. It's super hot, and they did a bunch of cast interviews all about talking about their time on Game of Thrones. And I forget which one of them said, they were asking him, what was your last season like? And he's like, well, I was just savoring it because I count my lucky stars every day that I'm on this huge show that's just #1 worldwide, and you just don't capture lightning in a bottle like that ever again in your career. Chances are super rare for it to happen once, let alone happen twice. And yeah, so you're going to be known for the rest of your life as X character on that show. You can either look at that as a positive or a negative. Some actors can embrace it and celebrate it and go, wow, that's an amazing thing that happened to me. Other actors go, now I'm typecast. I remember when David Schwimmer, when he was Ross on Friends, he was interviewed and he said, if I'm still Ross when I'm 50 or 60 or something, he's like, that'll just be the worst thing. And he's probably still Ross because he hasn't gone on to do, anything that's anybody remembers him.
But he was in Pallbearer.
Still Ross.
That's you think of, hey, you remember David Schwimmer? Oh yeah, the guy in Pallbearer?
No, he's Ross. He'll always be Ross.
It's like when Snoop Dogg turned his name to Snoop Lion. It's like, does anybody think of him as Snoop Lion? Oh, that rapper Snoop Lion? No, nobody says that.
Well, there are some successful self-identifying as something else that do occur. We've got the Puff Daddy to P. Diddy transition. We've got the
that was a smooth transition.
Bruce Jenner to whatever.
Another smooth transition, yeah. Nothing but smooth transitions. That's how the world goes.
But back to the typecasting thing, I think Rainn Wilson is always going to be Dwight Schrute.
He will.
Yeah.
And you even see that in the 2 lines he has in this movie. I see Dwight when I see him in this movie, as briefly as he's in here.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I would agree with that.
He was Dwight.
He has done some interesting work, though, where he is definitely not Dwight. He was in a movie with, who's the guy that was played Robin in the Batman series?
Chris O'Donnell?
No. The next one. He was in Inception.
Leonardo DiCaprio?
No, the other guy. He has 3 names. He's one of those 3-name guys. What the hell? Anyway, he was in that movie, and he was like the super angry, like depressed, rough guy. Anyway, yeah, he's pretty good. But if he's ever in any kind of comedy, he's just, he's...
Now, did you ever see The Rocker? Was he Dwight in The Rocker or not?
He was mostly Dwight in The Rocker. I saw The Rocker. Having had connection to the guy, I followed him for quite a while. I don't know. I know what he's doing now. I haven't watched anything he's done in a long time, but right now he's got a YouTube channel called Soul Pancake, and he's one of the few Baha'is in the world, but especially in like Hollywood, which is a religious, and he kind of promotes that on this religious show. It's kind of like a mysticism and comedy and whatever. Anyway, that's what he's into.
Is it the type of thing that you would watch it and go, this is what J.P. Sears makes fun of?
I don't know who J.P. Sears.
What?
J.P. Sears is the guy with the long
Don't
hair.
ignorant shame me.
He does,
How dare you?
Hilarious videos about veganism and religion and yoga and all these things. And he does comedy tours as well as a result of this. And I think he got famous for being a YouTuber or a Facebook Live person who was doing like these tongue-in-cheek, like over the top,
Okay, I have seen a few of his videos. Now that you mention it, I have seen. He could probably make fun of Baha'ism. I don't know. It's Baha'ism was like, or Baha'i. It started like the 1800s by some guys in the Middle East. Abdul Baha, Baha'u'llah, Shoghi Effendi, some names. They got cool names.
Well, I thought we offended a bunch on the Passion
The
of the Christ.
Bob. There's a guy named The Bob. The Bob. The BAAB, I think. It's pretty badass. Anyways, everybody's got to have, your own pantheon of like figures. Not action figures. I mean, you could have action figures, the whole franchise. You could have the movies, the TV shows, the books, like Christianity has.
Or like Osho had.
He didn't have the action figures, but he did have the books and the movies.
And the clothing selection at the...
his own clothing line. Right, yeah.
Yeah, all the red or the pink or whatever the color was. So anyway, let's shift over to Justin Long a little bit, because we just did a movie with him recently, Dodgeball, where, Justin Long, he's like the same character in every movie that he's in, as far as I recall.
He's young, earnest guy.
Yeah. Now, there was a time when he was doing Mac commercials with the nerdy guy who was playing the PC, and Justin Long was the hip, cool guy. Like, I'm a Mac. I'm cool. And the PC guy was super nerdy. So I just recently had my MacBook Pro die on me. And so I now associate that terrible event with Justin Long. So I don't know why we've been doing Justin Long movies lately, but
that son of a bitch. Let's go get him.
Well, let's go beat the crap out of him.
Well, let's rant about Macs a little bit, because I don't know if you know this, but the last couple of generations of their products haven't been as good. It's like they've been treading water. They're trying to like innovate a little bit, but not nearly as much as when Jobs was around. They added this touch bar thing, which no one likes. They changed the best keyboard on a laptop into this terrible butterfly mechanism that has very low key travel and gets gummed up quickly. And now they're on the second generation on it, and they put a silicone membrane in there to try to dampen it and make it better, but people still hate it. So the point of this mini rant is not only to fill time, but to mention that though my MacBook has died, I don't have one in mind to replace it with. Like, it's that bad of a situation in regards to their offering, in my humble opinion.
So your old MacBook is dying, but Apple is in such a shitty state as a company without Jobs. You don't trust their product.
Yeah, I'm not interested in buying a product where I'm going to hate the keyboard and it's going to cost me 2 to 3 times as much for the same under the hood horsepower to have it in a nicer form factor and Mac OS. Used to be called OS 10, now it's Mac OS.
Then why don't you just buy a PC?
Say that again?
Why don't you just buy a PC?
I've got one.
What's the problem?
It's not my Mac. If I could have my old Mac back, I would.
He's emotionally connected to it. It's a security blanket. He sleeps with it. He's kissed it.
Well, I also had a bunch of programs and files on there, and those are all now stranded on this dead device. And that does not translate over to the Windows machine.
I don't like Mac. You can't just like copy and
Yeah,
can't just left click and copy.
I do it all day long. I used to anyway.
It's different, and I don't like it.
Yeah, I don't like things that are different.
I like things to be exactly the same.
That was one of their campaigns, Think Different. Was that the one where they had the woman throw the hammer throw into the Big Brother type screen? There's a very famous commercial.
Oh,
Was that like 1984?
Right.
That's the original Macintosh commercial.
Super Bowl commercial, I think.
Yep.
Kind of broke them onto the scene.
Hey, Daniel, do you want to talk about Galaxy Quest?
Let's talk about, well, before we do that, since we're talking about religion.
Let's not get back to the movie. Who gives a shit? Let's talk about whatever you want to talk about. What's grinding your gears today, buddy?
Well, our audience has been with us a long time, so this might be a bit of a letdown episode, but I do want to harken back to our Passion of the Christ episode, which I don't know if, well, I do know that you felt similarly to me, that in the lead up to that recording, that there was some reticence. Like, we were nervous about how we were going to be able to discuss that movie without being over the top offensive. And ironically, or ironical enough, we did offend somebody, but not for the reasons that I thought we would offend them. Not for any of the religious stuff, not for any of the religious overtones, nothing. None of that seemed to elicit any negative response. In fact, people who are Christians wrote on our YouTube channel under the video, they said, oh, we really enjoyed this episode. You guys handled it very well. Even though you said you were atheists and you had the Anarcho-Christian on, it was a good episode. Well, one guy apparently took issue with us, and I quote, "You have a disgusting attitude toward poverty and the disabled. Grow out of your selfish attitude, adopt an elderly person, and wash and change them every day." That's what helping a human being is. Pouting about paying taxes and saying it's the same as pointing a gun at someone is a tantrum. Pathetic. End quote. Now,
Guys, it's pathetic.
I don't know where they
Terrible.
got that rant out of what we talked about. I mean, it has nothing to do with any of the religious aspects or anything. The only thing I can think of is perhaps when you talked about Jesus not being a socialist and talking about, love your neighbor doesn't mean point a gun at your neighbor to make them pay for their neighbor, that might be what elicited such a response. But I responded to them like, okay, so if he's saying that paying taxes and saying it's the same as pointing a gun at someone is a tantrum and it's pathetic, I said, well, what happens if I don't pay the money that the politicians demand of me? And obviously he didn't respond to that because, well, I mean, how can you? Because it literally is a gun to your head. But anyway, I thought it was an interesting comment to get any feedback on something. And that episode was one that I expected it because of the tone and the subject matter. But it's like out of left field. It's like, it's not even what I would have expected someone to be offended about. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's almost as if Christians have, are the actual adults in the room and they're accustomed to being shit on. I mean, I don't know if you read the Babylon Bee, which is way funnier than the Onion is these days. But if you read their headlines, they're very aware that Christians, and especially like white male Christians, are some of the least, most problematic and least respected. And, they're not part of this. Like, they don't get any victim points. They're, seen as like evil oppressor colonizer people. So they're very much aware of criticisms of their religion. So when we come along with our weak ass criticisms, they're like, yeah, I've heard that one before. Yeah, it totally rolls off their back, no problem. But if you upset one of these social justice types by saying that taxation is theft or something like that, man, their pain is getting a bunch real quick. And then they get all emotional. They keyboard warrior it up.
Yeah. Now, do you think that this is a sign of the collapse of Western society and morals? And so like the Thermians, where their society crumbled and fell into disarray, they were saved by the historical documents that were transmitted into space with the depictions of heroism and overcoming all odds, never give up, never surrender. They took that as their way of life. They took that as their philosophy and turned their society around as a result. And this was something that was made not for that purpose. This is something that was just a downstream, unintended consequence, unintended effect. So it goes to show that no matter what you do when you get your message out there, you never know what's going to happen, who it's going to reach. And I liken this to the Ron Paul moment where he reached a whole bunch of people with a message that sparked in their minds, like as a true thing. And so it inspired a lot of people to look into libertarianism and learn about it. I believe that you and I, Robert, are libertarians as a result of Ron Paul. And also Murray Rothbard's writings, he was writing when libertarians could fill his living room. And he was still putting out tons of articles and books and giving lectures and doing a bunch of content. And he had no hopes of, within his lifetime, of that really having much of an effect. But he still took the time and the effort to put it out there. And they're still publishing books based on his notes and his work. And it's very, very powerful. And it's almost like how they made this show and how it inspired a culture to save itself. Do you see libertarianism and Austrian economics as potentially those historical documents to save Western society from collapsing on itself? Robert, go.
So you're saying that if we broadcast Murray's lectures into space, there could be some Thermians or some other civilization that would see that and want to make their civilization great again.
I'm not saying that literally, but I'm saying in a sort of loosely similar way. Like,
so you had some kind of fantasy where you were beamed aboard some alien spaceship and they were like, Daniel, please, how do we save our society? And you were like, I know exactly. I got these lectures. And they're like, the historical documents. And they're like, Daniel, please save us. And you were like, Austrian economics, man, go. And
no, I mean, but really, like philosophically speaking, if you could get people to not hurt each other and not take each other's stuff,
well, that's always going to happen.
But not in an institutionalized way.
But not legally.
Right. Legal plunder and the belief in authority is the culprit. And then if people had an understanding of Austrian economics, so like what incentives and actual downstream effects of things are, and why almost every intervention, well, literally every intervention is using force and preventing people from making voluntary choices that they would have otherwise made to their mutual benefit, then everyone is worse off as a result. So I guess what I'm saying is that the message that we espouse would save a society if people were to more fully adopt it. But it seems as if the trend is going the other way in present day.
The pendulum is definitely swinging the other way, swinging towards socialism. More and more people are seeing a positive angle of socialism. And, every time it destroys a society, they're like, well, that's not true socialism. So it makes me wonder what they actually think socialism is. Just all good stuff, just sandwiches and turkeys and cupcakes.
And no force. It's just sharing. Everyone's sharing.
Everybody wanting to share all the time. That's what it is.
Right. And like the Thermians, they discover lies and deceit. And that is politicians, and that is political promises.
Yeah, that's another thing. That's a thing that kind of bothered me about the behaviors of the main characters in this film. And I'm wondering your guys' take on that. Did you have an issue with the fraud committed by the Tim Allen character and afterwards the rest of the crew when they purported themselves to be these space explorer people when they were absolutely not? Daniel, Anarchist Mom.
That's a good question. I never even thought about that. You could look at it the Machiavellian perspective, the end justified the means, but I mean, that's not really a good way to look at things. So I guess, yeah, they were kind of liars, but I never even thought of it that way.
And the Thermians said that they learned this from Cisco or Sissy or whatever his name was. Saris. And they said it's a concept that they learned at some great cost. And I mean, that's politics. That's people lying to you to get your vote, promising you things, and it's all lies all the time, and they rarely follow through. But as far as the main characters playing their roles, at first they were accidentally doing it, right? Tim Allen thought that he was being invited to do another gig, to do like some event where he's to play his character, and so he he doesn't even take that seriously. And when the Saris character first is involved with him, he's like, all right, fire all guns, fire all missiles, fire all phasers. And he's just takes off, he's hungover, whatever. But then he realizes, or he learns that it's real, and he wants to go back. And he thinks that he's this hero because that's what everyone tells him that he is, because of his prior experience with them. So he's trying to get his other, cast members to go and play along. And then when there actually is serious trouble, I think they put on this facade to maintain the morale of the people who look to them as heroes. And I think that was a necessary thing at the time.
Yeah.
Was it an immoral thing? They're committing fraud.
In a way, I mean, they are faking it till they make it, and their character arc completes when they actually are able to make those decisions that are effective and do have valor. And the Laredo can actually drive the ship, pilot the ship properly.
Yeah. The ends justify the means. Is it right for them to lie and to get, even though everything turned out okay, and they still lied?
Yeah, they lied. What if somebody came along and were like, hey, you're an auto mechanic, right? And you're like, yep, totally an auto mechanic. And they're like, great, we got this super critical mission, and we're going to definitely need an auto mechanic because this car is going to break down in the middle of the Alaskan highway, and we're all going to die if you don't do your job. And you're like, no problem, let's do it. And then you just fake it till you make it, right? Or would you actually say, maybe you guys should get like a real auto mechanic because that's going to be a better option for you.
Right, but you're assuming foreknowledge before they actually are in the event in those trying times. Like they were already in this position before it became serious. And they were backed against the wall. And so were all the people that they were, or the aliens, the Thermians, that they were helping. And it wasn't very long that they maintained the facade. When the Thermian leader was being tortured, Tim Allen did crack and he said, yeah, all right, we're just actors. We don't know anything.
So you don't have a problem with anything Tim Allen does up until what? He's just a completely immoral character for you the entire movie?
I love the Tim Allen character. And not only because he's a conservative-ish, libertarian light type who pisses off Hollywood, and his show got canceled, I think, because of his politics.
Yeah, but the show's being picked up by Fox again.
Say that again with...
I said the show's being picked up by Fox.
All right, a third time, so I hear it because you're a woman?
What?
I told you in the pre-show, which is available for our Patreon supporters at lastnighters.com/Patreon, that because you're a woman, I need to hear everything 3 times before it sinks in. Otherwise, I'll just put you on ignore mode.
All right, their show is again for 2019-2020 by Fox and 2017 by ABC.
Okay, all right. So I stand corrected. That's good. That's good. And I think, Tim Allen, he's a pretty funny guy. And he also doesn't, he calls out this SJW stuff,
He said in a 2018, and he said that he was kind of an anarchist, but then he went on to say that he doesn't, he wants a government that's responsible and that actually does what they're going to do. But then he also went on to say that his political party is the one that doesn't pay taxes. So I don't think he knows what anarchism is, because he said in that article that he was kind of an anarchist, but then he went on to say that it was kind of for government. So
He sounds like an ally that's still trying to figure things out.
yeah,
He's got a full-time job. He's got to survive in Hollywood. It's not easy, man.
You can't say too much. And I think that governance and government are two different things. I think you do need to have societal structures in place, voluntary hierarchies and things of that nature. Just remove the coercion and the belief in undue authority.
yes.
And if he's against taxes, then I mean, he just needs to take that to the logical conclusion, and he'll be right beside us.
It's so hard for people. They don't want to do that. They don't want to let go.
There's a lot of built-in cognitive dissonance, a lot of indoctrination you got to work through.
It's a feature. It's not a bug. All right, so let's talk about a few of the other characters before we are actually already getting low on time.
We've filled up this hour. Good job, everybody. We did it.
Well, we're not there yet. I still have a bunch more content, actually. So let's talk about some of the other characters. I liked the monk, Shalhoub. What's his name? Tony Shalhoub?
Yes, he was in X-Files 2, episode 3, Soft Life.
All right, so we have our nerd here who can tell all about which episode number. And I thought that was a fun callback reference when they were talking about like tactics that they were going to use with the rock monster or with Ceres. Like, oh, like in episode 22, do this. You know? That was kind of a cool little nod. But I thought that the Shalhoub character was kind of funny because it almost seemed like he didn't give a fuck.
It almost seemed like he was high.
Right, and even the Sam Rockwell character, crew member number 6, the red shirt guy who died, as soon as they beamed down. He's like, "Are you high?" to the Shalhoub character, but then he has a turning point. He has this character arc where he realizes with the what do they call it, the dicer, where it's supposed to be like a particle beamer, but it chops you up into little bits and then reassembles you.
Yeah.
And it turns that little pig monster thing inside out.
Yes.
And then he loses confidence in his abilities. But then something inspires him, and I think it's the woman alien.
Girl. Yeah.
The girl. That she like believes in him, and so he actually can do it and saves the Tim Allen character, shirtless, of course, in another funny nod to how Shatner would always end up with no shirt on in the original series in the 60s. But anyway, I thought that was fun, and I also thought that the Rockwell character was pretty funny.
Yeah, how does it work making out with an octopus tentacle monster? I mean, they just have these like visual fixer thingamajiggers, right? But I assume when you're actually touching one, you're feeling all the squishy parts and the things of the tentacles. Yeah,
so this is like what you were saying earlier. You want to talk about like what's feasible here. What would happen in reality if you had one of these machines that could optically change you, but you would still be a squid monster underneath? And Shalhoub actually ended up rather enjoying that, and it's off screen. And then Rockwell's character is like, "Oh, no one should do that. Get a room," So it's alluding to, I think, some BP
tentacle porn, the Japanese hentai tentacle porn.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, really, you're catering to all audiences in this movie, Galaxy Quest.
Something for everybody.
It's a great movie. It's got something for everyone.
All right, moving on. There's they go down to the planet after going through the mines and damaging their reactor core. And why do the mines not destroy their ship? Like, their ship seems virtually indestructible. It gets shot with missiles by Ceres' ship. It goes through the minefield, and it gets damaged. And when they do the computer report with Boobs McGee repeating everything, 97% hull damage, and their dilithium crystal thing, which I know that's not what they call it in this. They call it beryllium, maybe.
Beryllium.
Yeah, the beryllium sphere. But it's clearly a knockoff of the dilithium crystals from Star Trek. But why? How is their ship so like super indestructible until it's not? Like until you need to feel danger for the crew. And then they go down to this planet that's nearby to get these crystals from these demon babies who were probably reprising their role in The Passion of the Christ last week with a certain character carrying one of these little demon babies.
It's the power of lazy writing. It's where you'll see it in like X-Men movies and all kinds of different movies where the heroes, in this case, the ship, has varying power levels dependent on the scene because there always has to be tension, but you can't kill the main characters. So in the X-Men movies, you'll have a character that'll show that it has a power in one scene and then forget that they have that power in the next scene, because in that scene, if they had that power, it would just solve the situation instantly. It's lazy writing.
Right.
And you can write yourself into corners, and you're like, well, how do we get out of this one? Just keep things moving along, and hopefully people don't worry about it.
And this is what we talked about at the end of Dodgeball, right? And they actually made a joke about this whole type of situation.
Deus Ex Machina, thing. Yeah, right.
Right. Which I think that's pretty hilarious, especially when they so openly call that out. Now, back to the creepy miners. I thought there's some pretty funny jokes in here because they're working these mines, and the monk character's like,
Oh, they're minors?
they're probably 3 years old. And I think there's like a good spot to talk about child labor and how child labor, of course,
Do it, Daniel.
it's a hot button for people, and it sounds terrible, right? It sounds awful. But the whole of human history up until recent centuries has been difficult and hard to get by. And so children actually did have to work in order to provide enough sustenance for the family to survive.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you even see this in minimum wage laws. Rothbard has a lecture talking about this, where there were families, immigrant families, who were working together on the beaches clamming, digging clams, and they would get paid by the bucket or by the weight or whatever. And so the family would be out there together digging the clams, and collectively they could all gather enough clams to make a decent living, to provide for themselves. Well, minimum wage comes along, and now they need to be paid by the hour. Well, now they've priced out, and they've also outlawed child labor. So they've priced out the less productive of the workers, right? And they have eliminated the possibility of the children working. So now you only have the men working.
So now the family struggles.
Right, because the man alone can only gather so many clams.
Right.
He was gathering probably the most out of the family, but now you've just eliminated all of the other members of that family from being able to collect the clams, and the clams are still selling for, or whatever the clam rate is, right? So when the family unit was more productive, they were better off. They had a better standard of living. But when you had these regulations come in and prevent the family from all contributing, then they were worse off as a result. And by the way, what are the alternatives to child labor when there's not enough capital and investment for them to do something else, right? Like when you're living so close to the subsistence level, you're eliminating their ability to rise up out of that. And it's not as if they'd be skipping in meadows or going to school as an alternative. In like modern day Bangladesh, I think it's Ben Powell, I think is the guy who does the research. He actually studied this stuff. And this is when these kids end up in like child prostitution and other, obviously worse off situations than doing productive work in, say, a factory or a business.
Yeah. It only hurts them. Just do whatever the fuck they want.
Yeah, leftists like to think that it was, thanks to politicians and labor union that saved children from having to work. As if parents didn't care about their kids up until whenever that was. Did we lose Daniel? I think we lost Daniel. Hopefully we're still recording.
I'm here. Can you
hear
me? Can you hear me?
Oh, okay. You froze there.
Oh, well, it's probably your terrible internet connection there, Robert.
Suck it!
All right. So that was my rant on the miners. Well, no, I actually have a little bit more. So the demon babies, the Sigourney Weaver character, Boobs McGee, she thinks they're super cute. And one of the injured ones goes up to the water to drink the water. And they're like, oh, they're going to help him.
They
no,
kill
wrong.
him.
They bare their teeth, and they're these little demons, and they eat him. They eat the weak. They cull the weak to maintain the collective's strength. They kill the weakest link. And that is, to me, akin to socialism, only they don't attack the weak. They attack the strong, the ones who are successful, the productive, and they parasite on them. They leech on them, and they tax them. And, it's funny because the left understands taxes when they want to disincentivize something. They have tobacco taxes. They have sin taxes. They have soda taxes. They have all sorts of taxes in that realm where they're like, okay, if it's going to cost more, then people will do it less. We're going to manipulate behavior by increasing the cost of something. However, they don't apply it to minimum wage or regulations that make hiring somebody, employing them, more expensive. They deny that has any effect on employment. Also, when you're taxing people based on their profit, based on their production, their success, you are taxing them on success. Therefore, you're saying you want less success. The incentive structure is backwards, and they want it both ways. But the thing that's in play, they are not consistent about.
It's just cognitive dissonance
and economic ignorance, I would say.
Like they probably view those situations as different. And in some ways, sure, they are different, but I think that the mechanism in play is identical. You're making something cost more, therefore the demand for that, whatever it is going to go down.
Yeah, it's a basic economic law, supply and demand. But they like to pretend that it doesn't happen. And if you bring that up to a state, they'll cite X and X study saying, well, this study didn't find any overall decline in whatever, employment in this sector at this time. But they don't talk about how, well, what was the median or the base level of the pay for the lowest economic workers. So if the minimum wage is $15 an hour, but you're already getting paid, $14.50 anyway or whatever, well, it's not going to have a huge effect. But if it goes up to like $50 an hour, yeah, you're going to. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and that's just one problem with it. I mean, there's also the you can't isolate these things in a study. It's not a scientific experiment. You're not controlling all the variables, and people aren't stones and atoms. They respond to incentives, and there's other outside environmental effects that are at play. And so those will minimize or distort whatever they're finding. Also, how much science is done, and it's actually counter to the philosophy that they espouse to, is oftentimes they try to divine theory out of the data versus applying theory to illustrate with the data. You follow what I'm saying? Like they sort of have the cart before the horse.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed, sir. We should probably finish up this episode.
Well, I actually have more content.
You got more tangential relations between this movie and economics.
Right. So we're near.
What else you got?
We're nearly upon May 1st, which is May Day. In the rest of the world, not in the United States per se, but I think it's becoming more and more a thing. May Day is a socialist holiday. It's about revolution. It's about marches. It's about workers uniting, et cetera, et cetera. My wife and I went down to Santiago, Chile, like about 5 or 6 years ago. And we were in downtown Santiago during May Day, and we saw the marches. And while we were seeing these marches, there was this fomentation of violence and threat, and this just air of it's not a safe place to be. And they were a pack of wild dogs, and there were dogs everywhere in Chile. But there was this pack of dogs, similar to these demon babies, attacking a weaker dog during this protest march outside of, I forget what it's called, but it's where Allende and the coup took place. It's the big famous building in Santiago. There was the airstrike. They fired bombs into it. La Moneda, I think is what it's called. Anyway, so we saw this like dog fight, and it's this tag team of dogs attacking one dog. And it's like these demon babies attacking the weaker one, but it's also like socialists ganging up via democratic means to pillage another.
Wow, you're good.
Daniel can see economics in anything, the economics whisperer.
Right. So when you guys were saying there's not much in this, I was like, you guys are thinking too small. There's so much in this. Now, there's even another thing, which this goes back to your deceit question. Somebody says, and I forget exactly who, but they say he's wearing a costume, not a uniform. He doesn't deserve the authority. And I think they were talking about the Tim Allen character.
Yeah, Alan said that.
Right. Yeah. And I thought it was a great point because I view the police in this way. They're just wearing a costume. They don't legitimately have the authority to do many of the things that they do.
Here. Amen, sir. Correct. 100%.
Hey, guess what?
What?
Monday, I've had it for 4 years, so Monday I'm going to take care of it. So I'm going to go.
I knew it. I just want to look at her. You know she's a crook.
I'm going to municipal court to take care of it.
You've been getting away with far too much for far too long.
Yep.
Yeah, is it one of those wiffle ball bat situations like Robert here?
No.
She's not that much of a crook.
No, I ran a stop sign. Just never went to court for my...
Well, you better lawyer up and shut up.
I might have to.
So what do you got to do? You got to pay some monies?
Probably have to pay lots of money. It's been 4 years. 4 years.
Yeah, the government's sitting there. Bitch better have my money.
I'm just going to go in and play dumb and be like, I don't remember this. I forgot.
Well, good luck with that. I would consult a lawyer, consult a legal person. I can't give you legal advice.
Nah, I'm just going to go in.
Wing it. What could go wrong? What's the worst that could happen?
You guys, it's nothing.
It's not like she's going to get thrown in jail for the rest of her life.
It's just like running a stop sign.
The state never puts anybody in jail unless they really deserve it.
Never unjustly, never.
It'll be fine.
It's going to be fine.
It's going to
be fine.
You know, we're pulling for you. And if the worst does happen, it's going to be all the more incentive for voluntary contributions to your Patreon at Anarchist Mom. Patreon.com/AnarchistMom.
Anarchist Mom's Legal Defense Fund.
Nothing bad's going to happen.
We're not saying
that. Just repeat that over and over like a mantra.
All right, so back to the demon babies. When they're running away from the, they got the beryllium, dilithium crystal things. They're rolling them. They say there's thousands of them. I call bullshit. Even with the CGI effect, there's maybe 100. And then when they pull out wide, as the ship's taking off, and the Tim Allen character is being carried by these guys, and they're going to smash his head with a rock and eat him. There's maybe 100. There's not thousands. So I thought that was bullshit. And that Industrial Light and Magic and Spielberg and all the rest of them that did this portion could have CGI'd a million orcs in there, like Lord of the Rings style, like how we had in our discussion with Anarchist Mom last fall. And what episode was that again? Was it lastnighters.com/48? That's the show notes page for that.
December. Back
in December. That's right. So anyway, Ceres destroys the whole planet of the Thermians, and the only remaining Thermians alive are on this ship. And Ceres tortures their leader, and then he traps the remaining members of the crew on one of the decks and then opens up a hole in the ship to eliminate the oxygen. So they're asphyxiating, yet slowly and torturously, the crew. Obviously buying time for the heroes to come and save the day. But I thought that was one of those Bond villain moments where Ceres is just like, ha ha ha, I'm going to win. So therefore, I'm not going to even bother taking this seriously and eliminating you guys immediately. I'm going to give you guys a chance without realizing it. So also in lazy writing contrivance, but
yes, that's lazy
in my comedy movies here.
Lazy way to try and create some tension.
Yep.
Now, what did you think of Ceres' comment? And I should have brought this up earlier because you talked about the crew members lying and giving deceit to the Thermians. Because Ceres saw the little blip of their show and was like, well, you're obviously actors, like, how do these guys not get that? But he says, you guys have all done far greater damage than I ever could have. Bravo. And that's like this
destroying their planet. No, but they're going to hurt their feelings. You hurt their feelings. It's way more important than their planet.
Well, this ties right into the false hope situation that you were talking about earlier. The fraudulent, deceit of letting these people believe these false promises to maintain their morale. And that's also similar to the political promises, and Ceres even makes that point. Like, they understand lies and deceit. They don't understand, like entertainment and pretend. But when you get it to the point of lies and deceit, then it clicks with them because they explain it to them like they're a 5-year-old or whatever he says, like a child.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Another contrivance, the Crusher hallway, which seemed
so
very
bad.
Much like
the CGI did not age well at all.
Well, I'm just talking about the concept.
Yeah, the concept's terrible too.
But it's like you're playing Super Mario Brothers, and you got to like time it just right to get through this area. It's like all these video games, these side scrollers had this type of situation, this random hallway that's like booby trapped. But if you get the sequence down, you can get through.
Right, and they did hang a lantern on it, but I don't know, it didn't save the sequence from. They hang a lantern on it by calling it out, like, what writer wrote this? I hate this person. This is terrible. Yeah, it's just dumb. Was it funny for you?
Only because they played it up ham style.
Oh, they hammed it.
They hammed it up good.
Thanksgiving dinner.
Yeah, but this was similar thing to all the callbacks and allusions to things like the tropes that you would find in Star Trek and in episodes and then manifesting themselves, because this is the Thermians replicating this entire technology, this entire ship based on what was seen in the show. Now,
well, I'm impressed the Thermians could even do that, because when you're writing a TV show, you're not thinking about the logistics and the reality of this ship. You're just writing, well, okay, what do we need for this scene? Okay, we're going to need this. Put this in there. The Thermians actually made it all work and put it all together. Way more impressive.
Right, but based on the movements of the actors in the show. So to me, that sounds like an impossibility. Because if the actors are just doing random things...
Right, how could you make a real thing work, really?
Right. I mean, these guys must have, like, some pretty amazing...
They're just super smart.
But yet they're like children. And
yes.
They believe in fairy tales.
Or politicians, political promises.
Both.
Now, what was Ceres' motivation other than just to be a bad guy? Does anyone...
He was evil, Daniel. He was evil. He looked evil, so he's evil. I mean, he probably got bullied when he was a kid,
Fun of.
Yeah, I mean, he had those weird things on his back. They're probably always bumping into things and knocking stuff over. I don't know.
And he also had very severe punishment for his underlings when they failed him in their task. He would behead them.
Yeah, that's not very nice.
He was a jerk.
Now, I think I saw a report that who's the leader of North Korea now? It's Kim Jong-un? Is that right? Un. Apparently, some summit with Trump or a U.S. ambassador recently did not go well. Several months ago, there was like a successful one, and then they were going to do another one, and I don't know what happened with it. But apparently, some of the people responsible in the eyes of Un for failing at this were put to death by firing squad in this alleged report. I don't know the veracity of this. It could be pound fake news. I saw it on Yahoo, but who knows? But that's very Saris-like.
That is.
No, I've heard similar reports about North Korea in the past. I don't know, obviously, about this one being true or not. And I don't know if the reports I've heard in the past are true or not. But from what I hear, that's very much the norm.
Yeah, Michael Mouse's book, it was like that. Have you read his book?
Dear Leader?
Yeah. We'll
put a link to that on the show notes page.
That's Dear Reader.
It is.
All right, Dear Reader, yes.
It's Dear Reader, but it's because it can't say L's.
Yes, it's that's the way Malice works. He makes funny.
Yeah, but yeah, I've read that book.
All right, well, we'll put that on the show notes page, lastnighters.com/69, everyone. All right, so a few more notes on here. I thought that the callback/payoff to beaming up the Rock Dude to kick ass was kind of fun.
Yes.
Oh, opinion.
That broke up, Robert. Say that again.
I said you're allowed that opinion, sir.
All right, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
What you fail to realize is that this movie is actually a good movie, and that the story of them faking it till they make it is actually good. And we had plenty to talk about on this episode of Last Nighters. So let's get into final summary and review time, and we'll start with Anarchist Mom because we are almost out of time on this one.
We're way out of time. Over. Okay, it's a fun movie. I like it. I'm not going to give it a 10. Like I say 7.5.
All right, Robert, you're up.
So this has a lot of famous actors having some fun with a fair, a spoof setup of a cherished franchise. For me, I prefer Spaceballs, but this, this probably has better acting, or at least better actors in it. It still suffers for some lazy writing, but there are payoffs. There are, setups and payoffs, and there are characters that have arcs. So, it's not a complete disaster of a movie. So I'm going to give this a positive review. I think it's like a 6. Although it only gets a 6 because of its genre and what it was trying to do. It was a movie, setting up Star Trek. If this was just a generic comedy, I'd get a way worse review because I didn't laugh at all.
What?
The whole movie. Not once. I might have smiled a few times, but it was dumb and lame, the humor.
Oh,
maybe it was funny back in the day. Maybe I'm just a bitter old man.
You are a
bitter old man. Yeah, that's what I am.
All right.
If it's a comedy and didn't make me laugh, it's not a good comedy. Suck it. It's a 6.
All right. Robert gives it a 6. So Robert's back to his movie hating trope. His role on the show is to hate the movies that we watch, and that's fine. That's fine. I thought this movie was actually pretty good. I'd never seen it before. I got this movie back when I bought my very first DVD player at Best Buy back in college. They were incentivizing people to buy DVD players at the time because they were still a relatively new technology, but it was starting to get saturated. Prices were going down, and so they started offering, get 5 DVDs when you buy this DVD player. So I did buy a DVD player, and Galaxy Quest was one of the movies, as was Stargate and I think a few others. Now, I never watched this DVD. I don't even have this DVD anymore. When we moved a few years ago, we got rid of all of our DVDs, and now we do Amazon Prime and Vudu and those types of things. But it just goes to show you that the level of interest in me watching this movie goes back a good 20 years now of not watching this movie until last night, based on Anarchist Mom's choosing it for this show. And I gotta say that I was actually impressed by the movie. And I felt challenged by both of you when you both said to me that you didn't know what there was to talk about. So I shoehorned in a bunch of stuff from my notes, and we made an extra long bonus episode here of The Last Nighters, episode 69. So I enjoyed this movie. I thought the Tim Allen character was great. The send-up of Star Trek is pretty funny. You mentioned Spaceballs, Robert, and that seems to be the equivalent of the Star Wars. And so I think that is also a movie I'd like to do at some point in the future. It's a Mel Brooks one. It's really funny. But just in general, I thought this was a lot of fun. Even the people who played the actors in the original Star Trek and the Next Generation, I read some of their comments about this, and they also enjoyed this movie. Jean-Luc Picard really enjoyed it, as did Shatner. And actually, Tim Allen became friends with Shatner as a result of this movie. So I think that it fills a little niche. It became part of the canon of Star Trek, as demonstrated earlier when we talked about it being rated the number 7 Star Trek movie, even though it's not technically a Star Trek movie. And so because it's episode 69 of the show, I'm going to go with a 6.9 when really maybe it deserves a 6.5, but I'm going to give it a couple of bonus points on this this episode here of The Last Nighters. So that's my summary and review. And Robert, next week, it's going to be Cinco de Drinko weekend. So I think we got to get our cultural appropriation sombreros on and talk about another comedy, Three Amigos. And it's basically the comedy version of Seven Samurai, Magnificent Seven, which we've done in the past. We've done those movies as well. So I'll put show notes, links to those, but so you can be prepped for this, everyone. But Three Amigos, an interesting side note, is not available digitally other than for renting. So I had to buy a physical DVD. It'll be here tomorrow thanks to Amazon. I ordered it today. It'll be here tomorrow. So thank you, Amazon. I'll put a link to that on our show notes page as well. So if you want to get a copy of the DVD, you can get a copy of the DVD, and we will earn a very, very teeny tiny, itsy bitsy, teeny weeny little commissiony. All right. So Robert, any final comments before we give the floor to Anarchist Mom to plug her wares and say goodnight?
No, excellent job carrying this episode with your super tangentially related economic links to the film. Well done, Daniel. Just bravo.
Good job, Dan. So proud of you.
All right. Thank you guys. Thank you guys for being proud of me. Anarchist Mom, where can people find your show, the little rants that you talk about, and where can they support you for your future legal defense fund?
You can support me on Patreon, and you can find me on the podcast platform, Anarchist Mom. Not the Anarchist Mom.
And you also have anarchistmom.com, correct?
Yes, I do. And
All right.
I do.
All right. So we will put that on our show notes page. Thank you so much for being a guest on this episode of Last Nighters, episode 69. And with that, I'll say good night from last night, everyone. All right, we'll continue for a few more minutes on the Actual Anarchy podcast. My goodness, this has been a bit of a train wreck, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in our post show, the Kathleen Turner Overdrive, which is available for our Patreon supporters at actualanarchy.com/Patreon. This is episode 126 of our show, and I wanted to talk about ways that you can support the show as a listener, everyone, before we get into the Kathleen Turner Overdrive. The Patreon thing is nice. We really appreciate the monetary support. It's a bit of a motivator, like we're running a marathon. It's like, keep going. And it's like the signs that people hold up and hand you cookies and whatnot. So thank you for that. But as we've discussed on several recent episodes, the biggest bang for our buck will actually not cost you anything other than your time. And that is give us subscribes on YouTube, subscribes on iTunes, and also give us reviews on the old iTunes. And I'm going to start doing this. We have received some recent reviews. So I want to read them real quickly, and then we could say goodnight for Actual Anarchy. So one review is a 5-star, came out on April 13th of this year. Idiosyncratic, but tons of fun. Who knew you could talk about movies from a libertarian perspective? No one, but these guys figured it out. So thank you for your review. This is from Douglas. The Libertarian Cattleman also gives us a 5-star review on April the 8th. Good intro to libertarianism. I play this show to expose friends and family to these ideas. You pick an episode where you know the person has seen the movie being reviewed. It draws them in. The content is great as well, but not too hardcore for the normies. And that's why we have that last night's version of the show. And the final review I'm going to read is from April 6th from our very own Anarchist Mom guest. Funny and insightful. Haven't missed one episode. Robert and Daniel never disappoint me, except tonight on this episode, actualanarchy.com/126.
It's my fault.
All right. Any final comments from you, Anarchist Mom, before we get into Kathleen Turner Overdrive, and then we'll go to Robert.
No, I'm sorry.
It was already ruined before you got here.
It's been ruined for 126 episones.
So you can't be responsible for all those episodes.
I'm responsible.
All righty, everyone. Well, this has been a lot of fun, actually. Trying to cram in something to talk about on a movie that no one thought there was anything to talk about, and here we are, an hour and a half later. So One last thing I wanted to mention is your appearance on Lord of the Rings was episode 105 of Actual Anarchy. So I'll put that on the show notes page, actualanarchy.com/105 for your appearance for Lord of the Rings. This is episode 126, and I'll say goodnight. Peace out, everyone.
The Chipmunks. CHIPMUNK. We're the Chipmunks. Guaranteed to brighten your day. Do 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 do.
In the early days of the internet, radical libertarians were scattered, lonely, and faceless. Without direction, they resigned to scour the web, sifting through content providers in a wasteland plagued by YouTube demonetization, Facebook jail, and covert internet censorship. But then, in 2017, the Libertarian Union was formed. Finally, the average Joe libertarian could find a thriving community of independent podcasters and content providers, all in one convenient location. At Libertarian Union, we'll always have the latest news, interviews, discussions, and even movie reviews. With hundreds of episodes and more added all the time, you'll always find something fresh at libertarianunion.com.